Cesar, how many people have literally passed out on this TEDx stage of yours? So far, may I be the first? He also likes to bring people in for the dance, to get out our energy, and to really get us situated for our conversation. And since I didn't give him any great music, I'm just gonna play whatever the heck I want and hope he likes it later. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I have such an awesome interview planned for you today. We have in front of us Cesar Cervantes. He is a speaker and a speaker coach who specializes in TED and TEDx talks. So first, we're going to hear about Cesar, his story, and what he's up to today, especially if you're looking to get on that TED stage. So Cesar, I would love to hear more about you, and of course, welcome to the channel.
Where to begin? I think the start of my story is I'm essentially I always like to tell people like I'm a border boy. Like I grew up on the border, El Paso, Texas, and that's important for me because it represents multiple things in my life. But the primary thing is that my parents are immigrants, and I am the son of Mexican immigrants, and I'm the son of the values that they instilled in me, and all the gratitude I hold for everything they did and sacrificed. And so I have to begin there, but also the border for me represents this kind of duality of myself and the life I've lived up to this point. Often we don't really understand our childhood until we go back and we relive it as an adult and understand how we were shaped and influenced by it. But there was always this part of me that felt like, trying to live and occupy uh, different parts of myself to feel fully myself. And that began as sort of like, hey, I'm Mexican, but I'm American, and at home we might speak some Spanish, or my grandparents only speak Spanish, but then in other places you don't. And that growing up on the border in a bicultural community like that, you experience duality all the time. But then within myself, I think there was always this tension of this creative person, and then kind of assimilating or trying to fit into things that would bring you the things that you're supposed to want, or that that you need to survive. And so for me, even though there's this like analytical part of me, and I studied philosophy in college and that sort of a thing, the creative part of me was there consistently throughout, from the time I was a child through this very day. And I feel like most of my life was finding the balance of those two things and understanding how those two things exist in a way that um, that helps me feel fulfilled, but also gives something to other people. And that's really, I think, what all of us are searching for.
And that really shines through, because what I've noticed in your TED Talks, especially about the clickbait, you have one about clickbait, and I always struggle with this because I'm very descriptive in my video titles and my articles, because I don't want people to feel like they were tricked into reading something.
Yeah.
And so it really highlighted your values of authenticity and showing up, and especially even what you do as a coach. When we first met, and what I hear in your conversations about making sure that that person's coming in with an authentic reason why they're showing up to that stage, and it's not about I want to get known, period. Right? It's about what can I bring to the stage to give to others.
Yeah. Yeah, as a rule, what I've found is that uh and maybe this is cliche in some way, but we ultimately what we want is to bring people into our lives that are aligned with what we want to give, right? And so if we're looking, and this was kind of the primary point of that talk, the cure for clickbait, if we're always looking for the trick or the hook to get the outcome. Oftentimes the outcome is not actually the real outcome that we're seeking. And so we're tricking ourselves, right?
Mhm.
And because even if that trick works, then we're bringing people in that aren't aligned because we use the wrong bait.
Yep. Oh, yeah. And that happens a lot when people are worried about numbers. And it's such a head game, especially in social media space today. I think people then can learn about their conversion rates, right? Or something that shows, did I actually target the audience that I was meaning to target? And I think when we think, who are we targeting, is what audience can I provide the most value for?
Right. Yeah, I think that's it. And sometimes it happens. I can say for myself, like I didn't fully understand who those people were until I started just trusting myself and then learned who was being attracted to who I am. And so what you end up doing is just like, oh yeah, double down on that because not only are folks coming, but I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing and I'm really enjoying the people that I'm interacting with and I'm really helping them.
for for your beginnings when you started off in comedy, that
Hmm.
is something that I found so early in my life. My nickname was Silly Chili, and I think I leaned into humor as it's something that really resonated was I was sarcastic and the humor would come with element of truth,
Hmm.
and but I would use it to protect my emotions. So if I wanted to say something that was maybe a little controversial, but I was like really wanting to say it, I would
Yeah.
say it and get the laughs. And as I progressed in my life, so that was elementary school, getting the laughs was
Yeah.
easier. And then the transition to middle school, and it was a new crowd. And I was seeing the relation to what you experienced, and I'll have you tell your story. But I didn't get the laugh so much, and I lost
Mm.
myself completely. It's like I couldn't identify with people on a very serious level. And once I stopped getting the laughs, it was kind of like what happens in comedy. You know that it's a tough crowd, and you
Yeah.
just keep reinventing and keep figuring yourself out. But it's like, if I'm not funny, if I'm not silly Jilly anymore, and I became so serious,
Yeah.
and now it's kind of like been a 180. But how has your experience as a comedian shaped who you were then and kind of what your trajectory has been today?
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say that I identify with your story. I think ultimately what we're looking for is connection, and we learn tools of connection. And if somehow those tools aren't working anymore, we think it means that our identity is lost.
Mm-hmm.
But really, what we're seeking is authentic human connection,
Right.
right? And that's what, for me as a creative person, as a performer, as somebody who feels most alive on stage, what I discovered for myself was that comedy happened to be the medium for the deeper thing that I was actually seeking, which was connection. And if I really wanted to psychoanalyze it, it was a way in which I connected with my father, and he wasn't always like the most emotionally available guy, but we could always tell a joke,
Mm-hmm.
and or play sports. And so that became part of my identity because that's where I found connection with my father. So what happened was, for me, uh, I was a professional comic. I traveled a ton. I got to live in LA and do some acting and stuff like that. And uh, at some point, the connection wasn't there anymore. And I think it's just that I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to do more. I wanted to give more. And I felt like, and certainly, people go and they laugh and there's that thing and you meet with them after and it's like, yay. And you might even have really like great fans, that kind of thing. But you're not, to me at least, and I'm not Dave Chappelle. So maybe it's true for Dave Chappelle. But what I wanted ultimately was to be part of someone's transformation, to take them from here to like this whole new place where they could say, "Hey, I'm different now," or "I can apply these skills or these tools," or "I had an experience that changed me."
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that can happen at a comedy show, and maybe it has happened to people that have been in my comedy show, and I have no idea. But what I needed was really to be a part of that more one on one, and as a coach, as a teacher, of sorts, I really feel like that's where it lives for me. So what I ended up doing was I started teaching comedy because people would ask or tell me like, "Oh, I always wanted to get on stage," or, "I've always wanted to try and do that, but I don't know if I'm brave enough," or whatever. So I just started answering that call or that desire. And I thought maybe people would be coming to this class that I started teaching at the college, and then what became actually at the Fine Arts Center in Colorado Springs, what became this sort of public or community class rather that you could take. And what I found was that it wasn't people that wanted to be comedians; it was people that had always wanted to say something and be creative and be on a stage. And stand up happened to be one of the ways in which they felt like, "Ooh, that would be really cool." It could be poetry for some people. It could be like, the moth. It could be whatever the thing is. And that sort of realization that, for me, I was looking for connection, and the people that were coming were looking for connection by sharing something, became the idea for me for my first TED Talk. And it just, you start learning about yourself and
Yeah.
about how all this fits in.
And for anyone listening, we just talked about me starting your mentorship program, and I want to give them an introductory. So that if they say, like, heck no, do I want to get on stage? What did I tell you? I went from, oh, that sounds great, Caesar, but there's no way in heck. And then I channeled my inner Brene Brown. It's like, okay, she's very introverted. She did it, and she also didn't want it to go public, and that did, and she got used to being on stage, and I'm sure she's still struggles with her being an introvert on stage. And with my writing, you kind of go into like this vulnerability hangover. But to
Hmm.
have someone like you every step of the way to help mentor that person and say, well, I was able to get my message out through writing. And when I first wrote, I went from not being on social media at all because I didn't want anyone to know the shame of the life story that I had. And then one day I just had to release it. And the response it got was not expected. I was really talking about my pain point of something that I thought defined me as a failure. And it turned out it provided the community and connection that you talk about.
Hmm.
And then people want you to speak, but I'm like, oh no, 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 no. And I don't want to do that. But there's some people that don't like to read, or your story. If people hear books when it's being told by the author, it can be so profound. So if you have a message to share, getting it from multiple different perspectives is so important. And I wanted to share kind of what happened to me so that people aren't being like, well, you know what, I'm introverted. I never want to get on stage.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to listen anymore. I want to invite them to stay tuned because I immediately asked you, Caesar, how many people have literally passed out on this TEDx stage of yours so far? May I be the first?
Zero. Yeah. No, I don't know anybody that I've worked with that has had that experience. But, I think whether you're extroverted or introverted, this is a process that um, really forces you to kind of distill down what you care about, what your idea is, um, find your own voice, and think about who you're serving and who you're giving to. Because, you know, we're all going to get caught in this, like, oh, why am I the person to give this talk? And Brene Brown, since you bring her up, she talks about that very thing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And she talks about like saving seats for these things that inevitably will come up, and one of them is comparison, one of them is shame. um and I think that's right. Like, identify it, know what it is, and know that what you want to say and what you want to give is bigger than that.
Yep.
And and the truth is like, we will always have something else to compare it to, and there may be somebody bigger and greater, but they're not going to be able to reach the people that we can.
This resonates with someone you sent me that you coached, and their topic was imposter syndrome. And I
Hmm.
think the ultimate beating of not overcoming as in curing, but pressing through imposter syndrome and getting on stage is when you have the authentic desire to really share whatever that mission is that you have to convey to people. Because even with writing, that's kind of been my caliber of, do I really want to submit this?
Mm.
Or am I the person? And it's, how important is this message to me to get out there?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I read the article. I thought it was beautiful, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you submitted it.
Thank you. Yeah, That article will probably be something that people see as we work together, and the
Mm.
transformation of how I'm able to put it into words without being completely wordless right now. But to give people an idea, you just said something so fantastic, which we hear about in the coaching space. As we hear on the channel, there's some people that come from physician coaching, but it's that key word of transformation. Not, I'm going to teach you how to do your TEDx talk in a very transactional way, but a very transformational way. So therefore, if you get to the TEDx stage, like that's already, even the whole process is a win the whole time.
Yeah.
The thing that you just expressed was you get to identify more about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there's no way to create something like a TED Talk and not, um, find out more about yourself in the process. I think, for a number of reasons, but eh, when you learn how to communicate something really clearly and powerfully, it means doing the work
Mhm.
to be able to say it clearly and know why it's powerful.
Mm. That brings me back to in my liberal arts. You say you studied philosophy, right?
Hmm.
In my liberal arts school, I went to a small D3 school, and in one of the classes I had my first year, in our writing, we were forced to compress our papers, and you had a word limit that was very short, and it was meant to say you have to convey your message in a very short way. It has to be powerful. And I just remember sweating through that. But it's to your point, like making
Yeah.
sure, and you give an example of a joke that has just the right amount of words in it, like really to give that person exactly what they need to hit that power point.
Yeah, that's right. And so, in a TED talk, it's called a through line, right? Or like, like a thesis statement or something like that. And it's the guiding kind of force that you want people to take away, but then it also determines everything that you're sharing and that you're intentionally sharing it. And then it all links back to the through line. So for Brene, right, her through line is something like, vulnerability should be treasured, not hidden from, and that's the core of her message. And then she proves it to us, essentially. And she's a wonderful storyteller at the same time, which is really how we learn, how we're transformed from a 10-minute TED talk, which is it's kind of nutty just to think about that we've watched talks before within this time frame that have made us think differently, or have changed the way that we see the world. And I think that sometimes, you know, uh, we might think the transformation takes a long time, but there are moments essentially when transformation happens. And that's what I live for. Because through the process, like folks might have, one or two moments where they're aha or they're transformed in some way. And then the purpose is to create something so that when other people hear it, they're transformed.
This message is so important because I think often we are left kind of living our life without challenging the reasons why we do things. I think a lot of those transformational talks is when they challenge, where did you get the idea?
Hmm.
So we can hear limiting beliefs, or in healthcare we hear like, what, but how did that originate? And if
Hmm.
you had never thought about it, then you might have been giving meaning to something that really isn't that meaningful. Some of my articles might talk about BMI, and I'm an anti diet culture person because it does a lot of disservice to humans,
Hmm.
and it emphasizes things that ultimately cause the problems that it's pretending to help to improve.
Hmm.
But that could be a TEDx talk of its own.
It could.
So we'll pause on that one. So for TEDx, for TED, for TEDx, for people that are okay, well, that sounds great. What's so important, or why did TED speak to you?
Yeah, I think, some there's two reasons. One is more of a practical matter, which is to say that, as I was speaking earlier about this duality about myself, right? And trying to find this amalgam of the creative and, I don't know, I say analytical, but like, there's this part of me that also is something other than creative, right? That's like, okay, but focused and puts things in a box and has a backup plan for my backup plan. And, so these things are existing all the time. And I always felt like I I had to do one in one context and one in the other, and I always and that's why I felt like I was never quite at peace with any kind of job I was doing or creative thing. They could never come together for whatever reason. That's how it presented itself. And then I actually applied for this job that I wasn't even sure that I wanted, and I decided that I would interview in such a way that just told all the things. Yeah, I do stand up. Yeah, I also, I also really enjoy this other thing, and hey, I play tennis, and like, and that's not to say that like, I was strict about hiding those things, but I was certainly not like offering them in job interviews where it didn't have anything to do with the other. But what I found myself doing as I shared those things is telling them how they fit. Me bringing my full self fits into the work that I would be doing and working with students and teaching and or whatever else I was doing, right? And I got an offer for that job, but then they also said, "Hey, if you want this job, you got it. But by the way, there's this other job that's like 2 levels above
Wow.
this one, and we'd love for you to come and
Oh,
interview for
wow.
that."
Mhm.
And I did, and I got that one.
Wow.
And but this is, this is all to say, like, sometimes there's moments that change our behavior and the way that we think about things. And it took a moment where I only behaved differently because it felt more tiring or exhausting to keep doing it the same way, and I wasn't even sure that I wanted the ultimate outcome. So I almost just did it as a way of comfort.
Mhm.
um, and I just could not see myself ever not being my full self whenever I had the opportunity to do it.
This this story is going to resonate with every single person I've ever had on this channel and every person that I believe is drawn to it because it's all about being placed in a box, having to mask, and then being dehumanized. You're not feeling that you can fully express yourself.
Yeah.
When I was in medical school, I went to acting class. Melissa Lozoff is a great acting coach, and I would go there and I I stopped prematurely because I lost all my creative abilities because I was had been in the box for so long and I was judging my ability to be creative, not
Hmm.
realizing that because I had been boxed in so long that I just needed to re-practice being creative. Because like you,
Yes.
I know you started acting really early and I think I heard you were in commercials, right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I acted when I was little and I was like, "Oh, this is going to be fun." And it was not fun because I had gone into that it has to be right, I have to be good and I like was not. They put all
Yeah.
this pressure. But then as people are healing, they are talking about how much bringing in that play, especially when you were dancing in your beginning videos is like this is awesome because the first few minutes of my videos are always I'm always like nervous, to get situated and for you to break the ice that way, it just speaks very loudly to your insights and your intuitions as to what helps create that environment to get people to relax and show up as
Yeah.
their full self.
Yeah. Well, you gotta model um, what you want others to see and to do. And honestly, like me, the dancing thing or the song that I play was also a way to kind of shift me because
I didn't,
I
I didn't know if it was copyrighted, so I couldn't use that
we
today.
can play it. We can play it later.
Okay.
I would be preparing for like the TED class that I would teach like right before, right? And my brain was in my sort of like analytical, like pick it apart, put it into boxes. But I'm always thinking about the experience, and so it was a way to also shift me into a like, hey, it's like let's get into this thing. So yeah, to answer the question why TED, it felt to me like a perfect marriage of my two selves, which is this creative part of delivering and speaking. It's not stand up, but it is creative, right? It is public speaking. It is transformative, and then the piece of like, okay, what is the content, what is it that you're sharing that can actually move people, that can compel. And so when I set out to do my first, and that leading into the other two, but then also being a speaker coach for various TED sites, and then ultimately creating a business to help other people do this. And that's just now what I do, right? So I'm still a speaker, but I mostly coach, and I mostly help people craft their message and get it on the stage. And it's just like bringing all of me all the time, and there's nothing like it. There's no better feeling. This sense of fulfillment that comes only, I think the greatest sense of fulfillment comes when you're giving.
Mhm.
um i have this I have a story about me when I was in college, and I got to go on this spring break immersion trip, right? Where you go and you help like a community do a thing. And I grew up Catholic. I went to a Catholic school, St. Mary's University. And so we went to this small town in Mexico to help them like rebuild the fence around the church, right? And but quickly you start to see like, oh gosh, this is not about rebuilding the fence. This is about being in community with others, serving, and then ultimately being served by that, right? And it was funny because there was this game that I was playing within my mind about giving, and like I just set out to say, okay, look, I feel like a really privileged kid, and like, and I know where my parents came from, and like, I don't, I was there was a struggle. And so one of the ways in which I was like giving up my spring break to go and help, I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to give. So you go and you're doing the thing and you're giving, and then you're staying in. I stayed in this family's home. There's no running water. There's no electricity, and they gave me like one of two beds that they had, and they had, I think there was three children and the parents, and they were all sleeping in this other bed. And I was like, no, 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 that's not how we're going to do this, thank you, but hey, some of the kids can come over here, we can work it out, or I got a sleeping bag or whatever. And so that was kind of like, let me give, right? Let me make you a meal, let me whatever. And I felt like they were in some way just always out doing the giving. And so there was this ping pong back and forth. And finally, when I was leaving there, I gathered all my belongings and everything that I had taken with me, everything that was in my wallet, and I gave it to the oldest child, and I said, you take this, and it's yours, and give to your siblings or whatever. And I said to myself like, I got him. I got I had the last give, right? And then I got on our van, or the bus, or whatever we were on. I guess, yeah, it was like a bus. And I had this overwhelming um just sense of like fulfillment.
Mhm.
And I don't know how to describe it, but it was just, there was nothing better. Um and two things I learned from that. The first is that, um you might go into a community like that, or into a space, or into um a world, a new place, a new job, I don't know, whatever, and you might look at something like that and you might go like, oh, that's they have so little, right? But it's because we're valuing the wrong things.
Yeah.
um and the second is that you can't outgive what you receive.
Mhm. Okay, we're gonna end it right there. Okay, everyone sit on that, and we'll have a round two. But it's so true, and that shows up even in, I think, what alerted me to keep showing up to your TEDx Facebook site. I was like, you're celebrating everybody. Everyone's getting celebrated over there, and that showed your character. It was your enthusiasm for their success. And I find that there's a scarcity in our society of, if I'm successful, you can't be, we can't mutually be successful. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, you can be successful, you can be kind of like Oprah. You can be successful, you can be successful, you can be successful. And what does successful even mean? To your point of valuing the wrong things. Like for me now, it's often that connection is the greatest sign of success. Did I connect somebody authentically, and how was I able to provide that space for them to really heal? And that's what I see you do. It's what I
Mm.
heard you say, when you were talking about that transformation. It's like you're holding that space for that person to really lean into, who am I and where do I want to go? Who do I want to be and what do I want to toss?
Yeah, that's right.
So much more than a TEDx talk here. We've got, and you're a life coach and healer and everything that our society and our world needs right now.
Oh, you're too kind. I will point out that I will link our conversation back to TED and communication,
Yes.
right? Because I think, um, one of the things that I've learned through this process is that the story makes it real, and that's a story that I've only told maybe a couple of times, right? But there was to me, that's how you give people um, the takeaway.
Yeah.
And you'll see that in TED and in communication in general, is that if you really want people not to just understand, but to be compelled, story is how you help people arrive. And it's also how we move ourselves to
Yeah.
take action.
It's so beautiful. And I feel, when people are hearing this and they're kind of in that state, I can't say enough that I think that the whole journey, that transformational journey, when I write, it's a healing process. And from the beginning stage to the end stage of just that writing is so healing. And I can
Mm.
see for people that experience it and the same model, I know that you offer different models with one on one and the mentorship, but since I'm diving into the mentorship, I'll kind of share with people why, right? Because
Yeah.
the community aspect for me, when I went from the state of shame, isolation, guilt, feeling a failure for leaving a surgical residency at the same time I left the military, like a whole bunch of identities that just kind of evaporated, which was great. It ended up great because I learned that my true identity had nothing to do with those titles and hair. We birthed the YouTube channel all about that, and here you are. Um, and a lot of people resonate with that duality of where do I belong, whether it's being born somewhere else or with differences in their professions or differences in the expectations placed on them. But just sharing it in a community that is supportive and knowing that the best TED talk you can give is one that comes from the heart and has exactly the mission you just provided, is what am I giving to this crowd?
Mhm.
And you're healing through it, but in your own healing you invite others to heal who resonate with your story.
That's right. Yeah, that's it. Nailed it.
Beautiful. Slam dunk. Make sure to put some sound effects. Slam dunked it. And for anyone that might be curious, we have different ways. You have some really great resources that kind of give people exposure, and then all the way into jumping into the group mentoring or the one-on-one mentoring. Can you say what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, sure. So the TED group, I think, is where you're gonna have the most fun. And so if you just go on Facebook and you go Facebook /groups/ speak TEDx, or you can, send me a message on there. All of my handles on social media is at Mr. Cesar Cervantes. And
Awesome.
so the Insta, the LinkedIn.
I did just follow you on Insta. I feel like a very good stalker today. I like to get to know my guests so I know what to ask them. So if you notice I stalked you, that's why. It also provides me those links that we'll make sure to put in the descriptions
Oh,
for.
thank you.
So any last words to leave with the audience today?
If there's something brewing within you, you should trust it and you should pursue it. And for me, it was this thing that was like, hey, be this and also this at the same time, and it's not always going to be easy to figure that thing out. but you keep trying, and you just keep seeing what sticks and what works. And ultimately, I believe that keeping things separate or in their sort of boxes when they're a part of you is not going to lead to the thing that's gonna where you're gonna go like, oh wow, I didn't know life could be this good. I didn't know that I could find this thing that didn't even exist, or that I could create this thing that never existed. And that's where I've found myself. And so, also, if you have a message, if you have a story, and you want to bring it to the stage, I can help you do that, and I'd love to do it.
That's fantastic. And I also like when you show up as your true authentic self, you find the people who embrace you for your true
That's right.
self. I find when we mask, we often can feel very lonely in a crowd of people because it's not the people we were meant to be around.
Mm, there you go.
So that's my poetry. That was my TED talk. I guess I'm done with I'll still pay you anyway. It's fine. No, I'm just all right. Well, thank you, Caesar, for being here and sharing your story. It's just the beginning for us, and hopefully for anyone that also wants to join the journey. And
Thank you.
absolutely. And thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And make sure to reach out to Caesar. And until next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.